I'm concerned that these videos are coming across as very negative, perhaps unfairly so. So I would like to address the signs of improvement in this level as the start. First, when you're given directions as where to find things, the compass points in the instructions match the compass points in the game.
There are 2 separate units at the west end of the base.
They also managed to make a map which, while not as helpful as the vanilla map, actually includes the important details that are critical to the task that you're given at the start of the mission. Sadly, this late in the game, it's pretty much guaranteed that nobody's going to check the map or trust these directions because, well, of how many fuck-ups there's been so far. I mean, I didn't trust them. Okay, so now we're on to Vandenberg Air Force Base. This video took me quite a bit longer than I was hoping it would, partially just to me overdoing things and partially due to some of the design choices they've made here being utterly baffling and thus compelling me to try to work out what the overall underlying pseudo-philosophy behind them was. Anyway, let's open it up and see what's inside. If you're like me, or Caustic Creative, during your main playthrough you probably didn't spend a huge amount of time investigating all the lore of Vandenberg. It's a level that maintains a sort of urgency throughout it, and at this point in the game it's pretty exciting and fast-paced. That's kind of a shame given the text of the level. If you spend time looking about to get the lore, or just check the wiki, which was available around the time Caustic Creative started working on Paris, so definitely available when they started on this level, you find out that the area's story is pretty well suited to vanilla Spartan design. An old Air Force base got fucked up in an earthquake, abandoned by the military, and then sold, presumably through some shady dealings, to Savage's operation, who needed an isolated place to do their science experiments with a military communications link. That's the kind of basic research that one should do before revising a level like this. You may now place your bets as to whether you think Caustic Creative did or didn't do that research. One should also look up details about the real-life Vandenberg Air Force Base. Now, Caustic Creative actually seem to have done this, kind of. Well, they may have done a quick image search. The real Vandenberg Air Force Base is for launching rockets, long-distance missiles, shuttles, and all kinds of cool stuff like that. It's where space teams train, scientists research plans, etc. So the collapse of Vandenberg represented the death of America's dream to explore space. If you're confused about this, I regret to inform you that Elon Musk did not invent the dream to go into space. And he's never going to give us flying cars either. Not even electric ones. So let's have a look at what Caustic Creative added in revision, starting with the theme of this being an Air Force base specifically built around launching rockets, large missiles, space shuttles, etc. So I guess they did a Google image search, took down notes about the things that I liked, like the big ass flag with USAF next to it, but didn't save the file to use for reference or actually bother reading anything. Otherwise they might have noticed that ammunition storage is not really a high priority at Vandenberg, that the flag wall building is not an office, it's for building shuttles, and that they fucked up that flag in so many ways. And also that the flag building would have worked way better in the background, both thematically and from actually thinking about where the fuck the level is set up. They also clearly did not reference what the actual sign on Vandenberg looks like, or realize that no Air Force base refers to itself as AFB on its sign. That's an abbreviation assigned by the post office, not the military. Whatever. Let's have a look inside and see what Savage's team have done with the place, eh? Holy shit, this place is fancy for an abandoned Air Force base turned science facility. It's also rather obsessive about advertising the concept Air Force Base, to the extent that you'd never guess that the Air Force actually left the base, or that there was any sort of incident that forced them to vacate, until you get to the tunnel and find all the chemical and radiation leaks.
God! God! God!
This is particularly amazing given that they really invested a lot of effort into making these transparent spinners in high definition. I mean, these would have taken a lot of work and actually quite well constructed, just pointlessly. Particularly since they've also seemed to have decided that consistent signage is for losers, as is coherent design.
Watch it. He hasn't gone far.
Once you get into the tunnels, it's more or less the same until you go into Savage's office and we discover that apparently Gary has only rebranded one area of the base. But holy shit, he has spared no expense to remind us that he and his crew are from Area 51. Yep. Area 51 logo in the plush lobby, this weird holographic map that seems to exist in a room by itself, purely to remind any visitors where Area 51 is and that the team are from Area 51. I think Caustic Creative here were inspired by the Majestic 12 lobby in Hong Kong, but part of the idea here is that Savage is not supposed to be as megalomaniacal as Page and is working on a fraction of the budget. But hey, I guess Harris had to work out a way to fit those mirrored surfaces in. Gotta up that resource demand. Now, as previously mentioned, the overall story of Vandenberg Air Force Base is less pronounced than that of Paris. I don't want to further belabor the point, rather I would like to talk about this level as a demonstration of common pitfalls by modders and developers. Particularly since these are the same flaws that we see in the more recent Deus Ex products, such as Human Revolution, Mankind Divided, Breach, basically all the titles released in the last 7 years, so basically a whole generation's perception of Deus Ex. All these mistakes are the product of common human delusions. They occur more or less naturally unless you take steps to guard against them, and they're mostly absent in vanilla version due to the diligence of Iron Storm members, including, but not limited to, Mr. Spectre.
That's Warren, I don't answer to Mr. Spectre.
Sorry, Warren. Anyway, let's have a look at some of these delusions and how they influence the design. There's a general idea people cling to, that somehow spectacle will make a lasting experience. That levels will inherently become better with more and fancier assets, higher resolution, more light sources, etc. But even if this wasn't a really outdated product...
dot shadows. This was the pinnacle of tech at the time.
This is a fleeting glory at best. There's an abundance of games that marketed on spectacle and have now been forgotten.
But I used to get into arguments at Origin with Richard Garrett and other people. They just believed that if you created content, every single player should see it. Because why go to the effort of creating the content if everybody isn't going to see it because it's so expensive? And I always used to say, no, that's completely wrong.
Everybody.
You know, you want players seeing different stuff and talking about the different stuff they saw. And this game was all about that.
But it's kind of like a fireworks display. You gasp and you cheer while it's on, and then you forget about it as your brain files it away along with countless other displays and abstract fanciness. That's why nobody talks about the universal constructor explosion, or the carefully crafted exterior of the Statue of Liberty from vanilla.
But the coolest thing is, it's much later in the game, but I remember reading online a bunch of people talking about this headquarters later in the game, and one of them said, wasn't it cool when you rescued the prisoner in the jail down below? And someone else responded, what jail? You know?
Instead, what stays with people are the little moments that are a revelation or a story that centers on you. The things that people feel clever for uncovering are certainly one type.
It really bugged me.
Yep. I forgot. I just stole the soda off of his desk, and he's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, see, the world notices and responds. Cool. I mean, that's the thing in most games, especially
that's
back
against
then.
protocol, agent.
you could punch an NPC and they wouldn't even respond. And here you take his stupid can of soda.
Mess with. Oh, and we can. Yes. You could actually flush the toilets, turn on, and everything. This was great.
But so the surprises that people instinctively understand are a shared experience with thousands of other players.
Thank you, sir.
By the way, Denton, stay out of the ladies' restroom. That kind of activity embarrasses the agency more than it does you.
Tied into the delusion that spectacle will fix anything is the belief that because something took a lot of work to create, it will translate automatically into audience appreciation.
Took me like 3 hours to finish the shading on your upper lip. It's probably the best drawing I've ever done.
Whether it's a technical challenge, a complex design, or some weeks of research, it will just instantly have value to others. We want to believe our passion will be automatically contagious and we will be rewarded for our sharing it. Now, this is due to a psychological bias called the representative heuristic, where we tend to feel that the more work we do, the more reward we're entitled to. It's important for people working in games to be aware of this and to understand it, particularly in level design, since it's what leads to me, say, expecting that if I take the time to get to a difficult location with an enemy in it, I will probably get a better reward than I will for getting into easier location which just has a locked door. One of the big challenges for Ion Storm would have been to work out which parts that they had worked tirelessly on were actually working and were helping, and which ones were either not working or were simply just not best for the product.
And we let real people play the game. You could do everything you were going to do in the game, and it really wasn't hacked. It was as documented, but not hacked. And listening to their responses, I called that particular milestone the "Wow, these missions suck" milestone. We had a lot of work to do. Okay, we had potential. Everybody saw that, but we had a lot of work to do. So we ended up cutting and cutting and cutting. We had too much game. Harvey Smith, the lead designer, had been telling me, stop being a kitchen sink designer and cut stuff.
But there's a reason why they didn't tell the world about this when Deus Ex first came out, and why you don't see games promoted on the basis of how many breakdowns the staff had or how many drafts of designs the concept artists had to tear up. The reality is, humans, by and large, are an ungrateful lot and usually have no idea how much work or how little work goes into anything outside their own area of expertise. They don't care about the representativeness heuristic in regards to others. unless they're quality game devs, just themselves. Nobody wants to see how the sausage is made, not even the people making the sausage. Anyway, the main way this tends to lead to bad game design decisions is that it leads to levels being overworked, and in this case, level design modders assuming that just because they did a lot of work on adding to the original level design, it's automatically better, even if the new level items contradict the fluff, or finding the important points is now like Where's Wally? Or Waldo, depending on where you're from. In this case, pretty is the creator's personal preference in terms of aesthetic. Or in Caustic Creative's case, their sort of collective mix of love of bright colors, light effects, and luxurious designs, and fucking reflective surfaces. This is somewhat understandable delusion, given how many properties are known for their distinctive aesthetic. Fallout with its Atom Punk, Warhammer 40k Sci-Fi Baroque, Bioshock's Art Deco, Dishonored's Whale Oil Punk, and Mass Effect with its sexy aliens, the list goes on. However, pretty all the time is boring as fuck. That's why these games have different areas with different distinctive themes and vibes. If one was to redecorate the Air Force Base and try to impress people with it, then they would have been better off making it in stark contrast to Everett's home and making it clearly linked to, but very different and more run down than, say, the subbase or the MJ-12 lab in Hong Kong. That could have made a great impact on people, as it would have made the level special and memorable, rather than yet another overdecorated map that tells us nothing at all beyond what the modders think looks pretty. Aside from the baffling aesthetic changes, there's also a few major structural changes to the level. Now, while aesthetic changes are important since they impact the story being told, these are even more important as they impact the gameplay as well, and the aesthetics. So let's have a look at a few points. The real Vandenberg Air Force Base is huge. It has a large town to support it, and it's by the coast, which is a handy place to be if you're launching rockets that may just happen to fall out of the sky. So the terrain is relatively flat. But the Deus Ex version has no coastline in sight, and had this little cliff around the edge with corpses, cacti, and car wrecks. The message was this facility was in the middle of nowhere, so Majestic 12 had not needed to bother with subtlety. They had simply rolled in and slaughtered savages, unsuspecting people, once the bots had been disabled by Icarus. It was not a major part of the level by any stretch of the imagination. Only those who really wanted to explore were likely to find it, but it was a nice little area where players could poke around and get some extra story. This area has been greatly cut down and now has this weird side area where you see a cliff area that you can't quite get to. Well, you can try to get there, but you're going to fall to your death if you mistake it for some sort of extra area or the rest of the original area. Presumably, this was done to free up assets for a couple of new additions. The first pair of noteworthy structures, there's a pair of pairs for some reason, is these buildings that appear to be field barracks, placed right outside a building that would have cost tens of millions of dollars just to build the basic structure. I don't think even the US military is this bad at budgeting. One of these is literally a barracks, where a Majestic 12 soldier is apparently just chilling out, a la Milton and the Cubby Hubbies. Attention Caustic Creative, give Milton his coffee cup back, you monsters. He's by far the best character you have ever created, and is greatly diminished by your clumsy retcon. It's on YouTube. It's documented forever. It's happened. The other is this office that seems to be lifted from UNATCO HQ, complete with bowling trophies and a rocket? Am I supposed to believe Gunther Herman was stationed here recently? What? Basically, the only reason they seem to exist is because Costa Creative is terrified of negative space and quiet periods. Probably because that would give them time to reflect. Oh, and also because they know they can win brownie points for some people by just adding more items for the player to get if you somehow still need these weapon mods at this stage of the game. The second pair is less alike, but clearly made together. A lookout tower and a tunnel that goes from the courtyard to the comms building. Neither of these adds any sort of narrative or thematic value to the level. In fact, they kind of contradict it. Basically, the only reason they exist is to try to force the player to take a different route if they want to get to the comms building without killing anyone or without being shot by a sniper.
The snipers heard your helicopter and took off. You guys saved my life.
Just as the town outside the cathedral was built with a sewage tunnel just to give JC Denton a stealth option for when he eventually showed up. Though somehow managed to make this tunnel even more boring than the one in Paris. There's literally nothing of narrative or aesthetic value down here. Nothing to look at. It's just plain grey tunnel. It's kind of impressive that they managed to disregard both the Manila tunnel's atmosphere and their love of including reflective surfaces. All these showcase basic lack of putting function ahead of form, or basically disregarding the actual gameplay purpose of something in favor of aesthetics. Bad aesthetics. And that's likely due to a lack of investment in greyboxing. Greyboxing is a type of prototyping in game design where levels are assembled using only their critical forms, which traditionally were grey boxes. Nowadays they're grey polygons, but grey polygoning just doesn't sound as cool. And then the developers would mess around and see if the level is fun, or if things need changing, or if there's anything that just strikes them as wrong once they're wandering around in it. The reason for this is if you start decorating right away, you end up creating things that you become attached to, and then you start adjusting the design to accommodate that and compromising the gameplay. That happens whether it's because you've already sunk a ton of money into it by paying people, or whether it's just your pet project and now you've gotten so attached to the vision that you've created. Another related thing is, if you're going to make a video, you should probably know how many topic transitions you're going to have before you decide to add a sting to introduce them, particularly if it's going to be one that sounds cool at first but has definite diminishing returns. Do as I say, not as I do, kids. So anyway, the two AIs fulfill every AI shipper's dream and merge into one beautiful being.
I'm losing dataless. Yes. Hold on. Some things. The AIs seem to be merging.
We have the revelation that things are going bad, despite the fact everything looks fabulous. Then we get terrible directions from Bob Page.
Bring them to the abandoned gas station west of Vandenberg in exactly 1 hour.
That's Vanilla's fault. Sorry, Warren. And then we go off to meet Trace Tong in a section that was clearly not considered when decorating this level. To the extent I don't know if they ever played through this level or finished it. I mean, look at this. And off we fly. In the interest of not coming across as negative just for negativity's sake, I would like to take the time to reaffirm just two things. One, this level was left fairly minimal in vanilla because it was a transitional level. It wasn't meant to be lingered in and explored like, say, the streets of Hong Kong. It was basically an area that was meant to present you with some challenges and then move you on. That said, number two, there were still plenty of opportunities for expansion on the level, particularly since it's been long enough. I think it's safe to say that none of us really feel urgency anymore. And they were all basically the opposite of everything that Caustic Creative put in. For a fun creative exercise, let's try thinking of some things you could have added to the level that would have expanded in ways that were consistent with the overall story and the general focus and themes of Deus Ex. More stuff about rockets, satellites, and space! Air Force rooms that have been taken over by Savage's scientists. Workrooms, break rooms, etc. Think about the kind of kick-ass coffee machines that these guys would have been able to make. Seriously. Scientist, cyberpunk, coffee reek. Rooms in the main base, such as meeting rooms, storage, etc., that had been converted into living quarters because most of the staff at Vandenberg Air Force Base actually live off-site in the large town. Whiteboards, improvised posters, etc., showing the scientist's struggle and determination to conquer the Grey Death while still evading Majestic 12. Signs of earthquake damage, closure due to earthquake, etc. Little fixes that would make Deus Ex Vandenberg a little bit more like real-world Vandenberg.
I want those components, Savage. You will bring them to the abandoned gas station in exactly 1 hour.
Also, I feel that if you wanted to enhance the drama of the situation, it would have been better not to remove the dead scientists, but rather add things around the level that humanize them. I suspect that some of them were feeling conflicted over the choice to leave Area 51, and probably wrote that down in their datapad diaries. And I am positive that at least 2 guy scientists and 1 lady scientist would be crushing hard on Tiffany Savage. Focus. It's not just for photography, it's also what prevents your projects from derailing. Now, I was planning to incorporate the gas station into this video too, since it's a small level, and I figured how bad can they fuck it up? But when I'm working on these, I keep observing more and more issues. That leads to rewrites and overproducing, and that leads to, well, this. But let's finish this on a positive note. It seems that Caustic Creative, or rather Hawkbird, has concluded that racism in the Hong Kong level is bad, and has removed the racist posters. This makes Hawkbird the most important contributor to Caustic Creative's work since release. Okay, so originally I was going to have a bit here where I congratulated them on finally just letting this thing die, mostly due to a lack of activity on their bug tracking section. But then in between when I recorded that and when I finished rendering the video and when I double checked the video, this happened. So I guess that this mod is just going to be forever revised, which makes its title kind of interesting, I suppose. Anyway, see you next video when we have a look at the gas station. I really do feel like sometimes I'm missing out on some of the best content in this mod.